folks, we're back again. Going to be doing something a little different today. Going to actually be doing a review of a relatively new game. Judgement Apocalypse Survival Simulation. Only been out for about right around a month now from Suncrash, I believe the name of the company is. It's on Steam, been in early access for a while, but has recently gone live. This is a colony builder. Start out with a small group of people and build and expand and thrive and rescue new folks until you can eventually fight back an invasion of supernatural beasties ranging from a wide assortment of demons to ghosts to possessed folks to cultists to all kinds of interesting shenaniganery. Now first off, I'm going to show you how it starts out. You got your 4 basic difficulty settings and then a custom setting, which enemy numbers, work amount, needs, all this jazz is modifiable. And then the map seed. Now the map seed affects both the where your colony is built and the resources and availability of equipment there, and the shape and design of the overall strategic map. And we'll show you that here in just a moment. Once that's decided on, it'll give you 3 characters you start with. You start with just 3 random folk out on a camping trip, no weapons, no equipment, no gear, very limited supplies when you first start out, just enough supplies to get the basic equipment up and running. You can customize these characters as far as appearance goes, what they're wearing, colors of it, so forth and so on, but you can't directly customize their abilities. You can continuously randomize to get a new list, to get a new person, but you can't say take the crafter skill and give it to Heather, or take Heather's skeptic and give it to Arya the defender over here. You just have to cycle through the randomization until you get a group of people you need. So until that happens, you just have to keep going. Once you have the people set the way you want, you can go ahead and head on into the game. Now, since starting all over from the beginning is a relatively slow process, there's not a whole lot to do in the opening stages of the game, I'll go ahead and load up one of my currently running colonies, so I can show you some things in a little more detail. Now this is a good look at your starting location. Various resources are spawned in just as a matter of course. You've got trees, rocks, mineral deposits, diamonds, rubies, just random assorted stuff. Starting out, the only things you'll be able to get with any sort of, until you tech up a little bit, which we'll touch on in a minute, are the trees, stone deposits, and clay deposits, which you can quarry. Anything mineralogical, you don't start with the ability to build mines. And until you unlock the ability to build these mines, you won't be able to access this material. So, I'll go through this in a bit more detail here. Create a task, and you can set a person to, say, chop this tree, these 2 trees. Undoing it is just as simple. Now, when you first start out, as far as building here, you'll only have the basic log cabins, food prep table, beds. You won't have pretty much anything else other than, the 1 vegetable farm. And once you have those few items, that'll be enough to get you going. But everything else needs to be researched. Now you have 5 different tabs of research here, divided roughly into 2 groups. You've got base, craft, and weapons that are your more traditional, more I want to say real world, but that's not really applicable when you're talking about acid spewers and frost grenades and beam cannons and the like. It's not exactly too realistic, but more traditional development under basecraft and weapons. Occult and rituals are the more supernatural side of things. Occult are primarily weapons, equipment, charms, and passive buffs like additional damage to demons and that kind of thing. Whereas rituals are actual rituals that you can have someone complete in order to give you a short-term passive bonus. For example, using the stone circle, I can do the growth ritual, which will cause between, I'd say, 6 and 15 random fully matured trees to grow throughout my camp here somewhere. Rain ritual, which makes growing and tending your farms faster, and scrapping, or lucky bounty, which will make your scrapping a bit more effective. Now, it takes a person a certain amount of time. You can see down there 840 seconds for the growth ritual, 500 for the rain dance, 600 for the lucky bounty. So you have to dedicate one of your survivors to actually completing the ritual. But once it's done, you get that bonus. And that is the same process between researching the experiment tables for these three, and then the occult library here for the other two. Now, as far as leveling up your characters, they will level up just around the base doing random tasks. They will get a trickle of experience just from everything they do. And it gives you a nice little notification off to the right when someone levels up. June, for example, you can see is good with using dark weapons, can equip rare dark armor, crafting speed, damage, and damage received are all up by a little bit as affected by her skills. She is primarily, her biggest advantage is her ritual speed and research speed. She's very good at researching and doing the rituals that I mentioned before. Those are primarily her bonuses. So with the items with a plus will give you multiple options to choose from. The rest are just in a straight line. This leads to that, leads to that, and so on. You can build consecrated items, or the other options that were available there. Now, once you've built a requisite, say, weapons table or crafting station, and researched the appropriate items, let's say knives, nail guns, or crossbows, once you have those researched, you can head into your crafting menu over here and then build them. Build the nail gun, build the combat knife, pistols, armor, medical supplies, voodoo and other charms from the occult and ritual trees, as long as you have the resources to build. When you first start out, you'll have these here. This is about the extent of what you can craft: clubs, bows, and quarterstaffs. That's about it. Actually, it might even be just bows and clubs. This might be everything you're limited to for when you first load in. So, now once you've built some weapons and got your basic base up and running, you would go out into the world to do a scavenging run. You build a crew, set between 5 and 6 people. I think it levels up to 6 total, but you can start out at 5. And once you have these 5, you send them out to into the world. And the world is fairly good sized. You can see I'm 62 days into this particular playthrough, and I've discovered less than half of the world. And every single one of these icons you can see is another encounter you can go to. You'll have set enemies. You'll have an idea of what's there before you go there. You'll know what enemies you're going to face, as well as an idea of which resources you're going to get. It doesn't tell you how much of each resource, but it tells you which resources. And it's just a matter of clicking and sending your folk to it. Now, as he's running, this here, the pentagram with the little note on it, this marks a storyline mission. This is how the story progresses. The campaign progresses entirely at your own pace. If you wanted to, get beam cannons for all your people, have your entire town maxed out, 35 people, which is the soft cap of how many people you can have. If you want to do that before you do even the first campaign mission, you can. This is, I believe, the 3rd or 4th mission, where several of my people have been captured by a group of cultists, folks working with, or at least worshipping, the demons. So I have to go in there, eliminate these 20 folk, and get my people back. The reason I haven't done this mission yet is because these folks have weapons and guns equivalent to what I'm fielding right now, which means 20 against my 5. This is a battle I would lose and lose very badly. So I need to get better equipment before I'd be able to take on that mission. Now you just saw that was a random encounter. Those aren't particularly common. Those are relatively rare. And as you can see, it was a very, very small encounter. It was a minor demon and an imp, which are level 1 enemies. They're tier 1 enemies, very weak, very easy to take down. You get sulfur from killing them. I'm probably early mid-game. I'm probably about a solid tier to 2 tiers beyond those little imps and minor demons. They are early game enemies and not really a challenge to me anymore. These greenhouses, which look conspicuously like the houses from Monopoly, are other communities, other groups of survivors that are out in the world. I can go there, I can trade with them, I can help them with various quests and missions, and they will in turn trade with me and give me access to better equipment or equipment I can't manufacture using scrap as a resource. Going into this battle, like I said, you can see what's there. 2 fire imps and 2 imps. This is a very weak entry-level group. I could take these on with probably fists and beat them. And these scavenging missions are where the majority of your resources are going to come from. You get a slight trickle of resources from your base, from mining and scavenging and chopping down trees and whatnot. But the majority of your resources, as well as large quantities of them in a short period of time, you'll have to go out on the scavenging runs in order to get them. Now, as far as the scavenging runs go, you can just kill all the enemies that are on the map. That's an entirely acceptable way of clearing it. Or you can search and find these boxes marked by let's get you guys out of the way, marked by an exclamation point on the map, and you can just have someone gather directly from the source. This will take, depending on the person's scavenging speed, this can take a few seconds up to about a minute per box. And depending on how many resources were available on the map, depends on how many of these boxes you would have to search. This can come in handy if you need a rarer research or a rarer material that that's guarded by harder enemies that you can't really beat yet. But you can find these boxes, gather the items, and then get the hell out of Dodge before the hardcore enemies find you. But most of the time, it's worth it just to kill the enemies off. Because every time you kill an enemy, you get loot from them. Like you saw from that minor demon and those imps, I get a small amount of sulfur that I can then use to craft other items at my base, or I could just sell the sulfur off to another compound, another colony, for more scrap that I can use to get other equipment. Now you see, the imps aren't a challenge at all. Now you can see here that every area, the different colorations on the maps, go ahead and pause, depends on what you're going to be facing. Here in the light green areas, the most common, you're going to be encountering the imps, like I just did. Hellhounds, reapers, fire imps, normal imps, werewolves, tier 1 enemies, stuff that's relatively easy to take down. None of these, the werewolves, the reapers, they might give you a little bit of a challenge when you're first getting started, but once you get to your second bows, compound bows, and the like, they're really not that much of a threat. The desert areas, these tan areas, have different enemies and different loot. You can see here I would be able to get weapon parts and demonite, which is also dropped from killing demons. And I'd be facing some of the same tier 1 enemies, the reapers and the werewolves, but I'd also be facing ghosts and possessed. Possessed actually have human level firearms. They have 9mm. So they're a bit more dangerous, they're a bit more of a threat, and they can actually take you down fairly quickly if you're not careful. Ghosts are the same thing. They're extremely fragile. They're easy to take down, but they have a long-range blast attack that can cause you a lot of trouble if you're not careful. We'll go ahead and let's show this mine. 2 ghosts, a hellhound. You know what, we'll go ahead and show this battle so you can see how these enemies react a little bit. And as you can see here, gunpowder and copper, as opposed to the canned food and hides that I would get from the farm up there. So the different areas depend on what you'll get from them completing each one of these little icons. My folks are reasonably well equipped. Like I said, this is about mid-game. I am not at any rate equipped with high-end weapons or equipment. I am miles away from being maxed out. I have one gal here, June, with a Sword of Paracelsus, which is a pretty decent melee weapon, but the vast majority of my crew is running with ranged weapons. Glenn back here has a coil gun, which just another name for a railgun magnetic acceleration weapon. Behemoth here has an arquebus, which is a large. It's pretty much the first entry into the sniper weapons you can get. As you can see, yeah, that's the blast coming in from the ghosts. Does a little bit of damage, but nothing too critical. Permanent damage, looking here, is the empty bar next to it. Anything that's in gray will heal at the end of this particular instance, or can be healed by medical supplies. So there's two levels of damage, the stuff that can be healed immediately and the stuff that can't be healed except for time spent at your base. Here we got some Hellhounds and a Demon. Hellhounds are very weak, melee attack only. Their only advantage is the Hellhounds are very, very fast. They can get up on you very quickly and can overwhelm you if you're not careful. Now, as far as my other folks here, see if it'll let me get into them. Nah, it's not going to let me get into what they're having. So when you're done scavenging, when your folks start getting a little beat up, or when you're expecting an attack on your main compound, you want to go ahead and recall them back to base. Before you get attacked, you will get a warning notification down here on the right side of the screen telling you that someone is coming to attack your base. You could set up defensive plans, make sure your folks are armed. Depending on what you have researched, you can build guardhouses, bunkers, sniper towers, barricades and defenses. A lot of that I haven't researched yet. Here's a good one. All right. And you can move on from there. This here, which coincidentally just popped up, is how you get your people. To my knowledge, as far as I've gotten, this is the only way you get new survivors. It's these assistance needed missions that pop up out of the world. They look like the hand there. So this will pop up somewhere in the general vicinity. The farthest one I've ever had was up here. So they'll usually be relatively close to your base. And it's a safety mission. It'll tell you what the starting enemies are, like anything else. I got 3 succubuses and a ghost. Succubi. What's succubi? Yeah, I think the plural of succubus is succubi. At any rate, go in, clear them out, and we'll show you how that runs from here. As far as the maps go, every map is randomly generated, except for, I believe, the campaign progress maps. I think those are hard-coded. But the rescue maps, the standard scavenging maps, all of them are randomly generated. The enemies are consistent, but the tile placement, the structures, the trees, the barrels, the cars, all of that will be randomly generated every time you load the map. So if, for example, I were to load autosave send rescue right here, the entire map would be different. Everything would be placed in a different area. I would still have those same enemies, but they would be, the map itself would be placed in a different direction. There we go. That should be the last of the defenders. See, June took a couple solid hits from those succubi. Now, on the rescue missions, this is what you're looking for. This little cylindrical cage right here. There is a survivor in there. And in order to get the survivor out, you have to take one person and dedicate them to opening the cage. And the entire time they're opening that cage, they're not in the fight. They're not going to be able to defend themselves. They're not going to be able to fight off any attackers. So you want to make sure your other folks are set up relatively close by so they can protect this person while this person opens the cage. Now you can see the little yellow bar filling in around the gears here. That tells you how much time until the cage is open. Usually it's anywhere from 2 to 4 waves of additional enemies you'll have to kill while this person's opening the cage. And depending on how many people you have, the more folks you've rescued, the more difficult these waves are going to be. It scales pretty much directly. When the people are out, you evacuate. Hit the retreat button and everybody will head towards the nearest evacuation point, which, here, little retreat box. And I rescued Kelly. Now I can look at Kelly and see the basics of what she's got. She's an academic. There are, I want to say, between 8 and 12 starting classes. I'll take a closer look at that once I get back to base, now that I've rescued her. And again, recall back to base, speed up time to get there quicker. And there you go. Once they're back at base, you head back into the base view, and everybody will immediately head back to work. Your assault crew will immediately go back to what they were doing before you left, and start adding on to what you've done. Now, as far as controlling what they've done, what your folks do, you can, say, take Beckett here and assign him to go chop a tree. You can make them individually target a specific item. You can make Behemoth train. You can make George do a ritual. The more effective way of doing that, instead of controlling anywhere between 3 and 35 people, is to go into the priorities list. And it gives you a breakdown of the person and what they're good at. Beckett, for example, has a plus 20 to water gathering, plus 20 to wood chopping, plus 10 to searching debris, and then everything else is standard. But let's say that Beckett had a plus 100 or plus 175 to his craft, to his mining. Just drag and drop. And then he will prioritize mining before anything else. This definitely comes in handy. This is how you avoid having, say, your best crafter, Tom in this case. He's going to focus on building things that I queue up, as opposed to wasting his time chopping wood or gathering water. This is how I avoid having June, my best ritual performer, mining or searching debris. So you can have your people focus on what they're best at. Makes things a lot easier. Now, as far as, I know I touched on crafting in a little bit of detail earlier, but I'm going to go back to it right now. I'll show you in a little more detail what we're looking at. To build a coil gun, for example, I need metals, weapon parts, and copper. Metals is obtained from metal mines, which start scattered around. To build metal mines on metal resources, should have a mine, yeah, right here. You can have one person working on each mine, and they'll gather it over time. The same goes for the weapon parts. You can have the metal you get, and then use this weapons workshop to craft weapons parts once you've researched them. Copper you can't mine. The copper you see there, you have to get those from the desert missions that I showed you earlier. So as far as crafting things, you'll have a mix of things you can craft at your base and things you have to get from salvaging. Clubs, of course, are just wood, bows are wood, and arrows are just more wood. A lot of the stuff is dependent on something else from a previous tier. As far as the most potent armor I can get right now would be holy armor. I need the holy water, metals, and cloth in order to make the one holy armor. The cloth I can manufacture once you unlock it, same with holy water, and you can mine the metals. As far as the icebox, I've looted 102 herbs, and there is an herb garden later on that you can research. I believe it's under... Here, yeah, it's here under gardening, herb garden. I haven't researched it yet. So all of the herbs I have for making those ice boxes, I have looted from other missions. So that's a nice way to get around it. If you don't have the farm set up for the herbs, you can go out and loot the herbs from other combats, from the scavenging missions, so that you can make the ice boxes, for example. Then you can go from there. Now, the farther you head down the research tree, the better the weapons and equipment get, the more passive equipment you get, larger task force size unlocked with advanced logistics. That means another person in my scavenging party. That would take it up to 6. And I think that 6 is the biggest that your scouting party can get. I might be mistaken on that, but I believe that's it. I believe 6 is as big as it can get. So, well, yeah. So we've gone through the research, gone through the crafting and the building, gone through scavenging missions and everything else. As you can see, I don't have any of those defensive structures right now. I don't have access to the guard towers, the pillboxes. I can build these barriers, which is just your standard, basically log sharpened to a point. This will block enemy movement, but won't block ranged attacks. So with this setup, this perimeter setup here, it controls where the attacks against my base are going to come from. They'll have to come in. If they come in from this edge, they'll have to pass around it. Later on, you can get, like I said, guard towers, pillboxes, and the like that actually give bonuses to defense. You can put people inside them in order to kill enemies from a longer distance more effectively, but I haven't researched any of that yet. So I don't currently have access to it. But that'll come as time goes by. Now, all in all, this game, like I said, it's just out of early access. It's been active for less than a month now. And for what it is, it's a very solid colony builder survival style game. It's not going to win any awards for its graphics. As you can see, the isometric view here is somewhat dated. But that really, it was never marketed as a graphical powerhouse, never meant to be one, and frankly, the graphics don't detract from the gameplay at all. They're good enough to tell you what you're looking at, tell you what your people are doing. You can tell your people from the enemies without any trouble. So the graphic settings, the graphics are really the only downside to this game in my mind. But again, it's not that much of a downside because it's still completely functional. You can still play the game without any issue. And that's really the only downside. I haven't encountered, in 63 days, I haven't encountered any hard crashes, haven't encountered any significant glitches. The game is a challenge. There is permadeath. If you lose a character, they're dead for good, or unless you want to load a save, of course. So, there is a challenge to it. If you try to rush the survivor rescue missions, for example, you can find yourself in a position real quick where your enemies are drastically more powerful than you are, and that can cause you a lot of trouble. But as long as you're paying attention, as long as you're crafting those better weapons and better equipment as you unlock them, and getting your folks equipped and getting good defensive positions set up, it's a challenge, but you can definitely advance through the game. Thus far, day 63, and I'm probably going to doom myself here. I haven't lost anyone, haven't lost a single survivor thus far. And it just comes down to using your people in an intelligent fashion, not getting yourself into fights you can't win. And generally comes down to knowledge more than brute force. Don't go up against high-end demons if you have bows and sticks. You'll get destroyed for no gain. All in all, I'd give this game for what it is a solid, I don't know, 8 out of 10. It does what it does, and it does it well. And another nice touch is, even though it's a relatively new game, they have the tendency of putting it on sale quite regularly. I mean, the price isn't bad for what it is right now, but if you want to wait a couple weeks till the Steam Summer Sale pops up, you'll probably be looking at a 50 to 75% off sale. That's fairly consistent for this game, so it's definitely something to keep an eye on. So again, yeah, if you're into these survival style games, these colony management games, look it up. Like I said, it's available on Steam, relatively small download, and the price point isn't going to break anybody either. And it's a solid title. Look into it. As always, folks, thanks for watching. Keep an eye on the channel. I might be doing more of these game review videos as time goes by, or more of the more of the just straight gameplay commentaries like I did with Wolfenstein and Prey. We'll see where that goes. And eventually, once I get my hands on a decent camera, I'll actually start the guns side of the Guns and Games channel, doing real-world weapon reviews, maintenance, breakdowns, modifications, that kind of thing. But I need a decent camera before I can get into that, so it'll be a little while. As always, folks, thanks for watching. Keep an eye on the channel for the next video, and I'll see you then.